There's a secret to winning in baseball that teams will never use in real life. It's something that analytic experts suggest, but would be so ridiculous that fans would probably stop watching the game entirely, because this idea goes completely against the fundamentals of baseball. It's also really boring. But this strategy could extend hitters' careers, help teams score more runs, and win more games, and the only thing that they have to do is do nothing at all. In baseball, everyone knows the goal of the game is to score more runs than the other team. If you're watching this video and don't know anything about baseball, you probably even knew that. You probably also know that the way teams score runs is by hitting the ball where the fielders aren't and avoiding getting out. You've got 27 outs to get as many runs as possible. So what's the best way to do it? Modern baseball believes that the best way to score runs is to hit the ball over the fence. Homers are clearly the most efficient way to score because they're automatic runs. Put one over the fence and you've put a run on the board. But hitting homers is hard. If it was easy, you wouldn't have people making a huge deal about Aaron Judge hitting 62 home runs this year, and you wouldn't have debates about who the true home run king is. So what's the next best solution? Old school baseball fans pined for the days when you slapped the ball around the field, bunted the runner over to second, and didn't hit home runs. These were the days when the home run king was Roger Connor. How dare he hit 138 home runs? That's too many homers. Singles, doubles, triples, that's the true way to play baseball. Move the runner over, move the runner in. But whether you're a fan of the three true outcomes, or if you love small ball, one thing has remained constant since the inception of baseball. You've got to swing the bat. But what if I told you that the best way to score runs in baseball, the best way to win, is to not swing at all? As crazy as this sounds, this might actually be true.
That's not true! That's impossible!
Here's why. While hitting the ball is one way to get on base, whether it's a bloop single or a 500-foot blast, there are actually 3 other ways to get on base that don't require you to swing the bat at all. The first is the walk. There are 2 types of walks, the 4-ball variety and the intentional no-pitch variety. And even though the latter has only been around in Major League Baseball for half a decade now, it's always funny seeing how confused players look, especially on this insane bases-loaded intentional walk that probably led to Joe Maddon getting fired. The second way is definitely more painful, and unless you're someone like Anthony Rizzo, this probably isn't your preferred way of getting on base. It's the hit batsman. The final one technically doesn't require a swing, but I've never personally seen this happen where the batter doesn't. This is the drop third strike rule. For whatever dumb reason, Major League Baseball rules state that if the third strike is dropped, the batter has the potential to take first base, but only if there's no one on that base to begin with. It's confusing. This is allowed for the weird feat of 4 strikeout innings, even though each team only gets 3 outs. A lot of those drop third strikes are results of terrible swings, like this one and this one. But if you're someone like AJ Pierzynski, you might even be able to talk your way into reaching first, even if the ball doesn't hit the ground in the first place. This rarely happens, however, and even though this rarely happens, it is theoretically one way to reach base without swinging. All that needs to happen is for the catcher to drop the ball. So reaching base without swinging is obviously possible. But how is this the possible secret for winning games? Because, at least hypothetically, each swing carries a negative run value. See, over the past decade, strikeouts in baseball has risen 11%. There were 5,000 more strikeouts in 2022 than there were in 2012. The average fastball velocity has also risen an entire mile an hour. This might not sound like a lot, but the number of pitches that were over 100 miles an hour has gone from being a few hundred in a season in the early 2000s to a couple thousand a year now. You have guys like Spencer Strider, Hunter Green, and Jacob deGrom throwing gas for innings on innings as starters, and that's not even mentioning their wipeout off-speed pitches. And then there are bullpen arms like Ryan Helsley, Emmanuel Clase, and Johan Duran, who throw up to 105 miles an hour and have some of the craziest breaking pitches that you will ever see. But as pitchers have started throwing harder and harder, with secondary pitches that spin more and more, something else has begun to happen in addition to the strikeouts.
Way up high, off the backstop.
There are now more pitches out of the zone than ever. See, if you're a batter, you're actually more likely to see a ball than a strike. And if you were to just look at the numbers, you'd say that I'm lying, because I am. There were, in fact, almost 500,000 strikes thrown in 2022, compared to a mere 250,000 balls. But this doesn't quite tell you the true story, because batters swing at balls all the time, turning this into this. You have guys like Javier Baez swinging at over 250 sliders alone outside the strike zone. And while walks have only gone up by a few hundred or so, 2022 had significantly fewer walks than 2021. Chasing pitches has only gone up. A 2% increase doesn't sound like a lot, but consider this. There were over 105,000 swings on pitches outside the zone. If you were to subtract this from the number of strikes and add them to the number of balls, you would have had more than 8,000 more balls than strikes thrown that year. Additionally, if batters simply decided not to swing, that would add up to as many as 26,000 more walks if those pitches were consecutive. You want to know how many walks there were in 2022? 14.8 thousand. That means that if hitters simply didn't swing at pitches, they could have increased walks by up to 175%. So by not swinging, a team could hypothetically just walk-a-thon themselves to victory, and since swinging carries a negative run value, there is no point in swinging, right? right? Wrong. You know this, and if you're still watching this video, you've probably thought to yourself several times, this guy is an idiot.
What are you, stupid? What's the matter with you? I apologize. What's the matter with you?
And of course, you're right. You probably also thought if hitters just stopped swinging entirely, then pitchers would simply lob in strikes, right? Right. No team in their right mind would ever enforce a no swings ever approach. This is idiotic. This is analytic baseball done wrong. The only people who would ever implement this are guys who've never seen the game in person. Just as an example, there are waste pitches, balls thrown out of the zone intentionally to see if the batter will swing. That's all pitchers have done to Javi Baez since he came into the league. His 150 swings on sliders outside the zone haven't happened by accident, but the clearest reason why this strategy doesn't work is because walks only move base runners up by one base at a time. It doesn't matter if you have a team of Billy Hamiltons and Terrence Gores who could walk and steal their way across the base paths. Unless you get 4 consecutive walks before getting 3 outs, you're not gonna score, ever. But that doesn't mean that this idea is completely asinine. In fact, the best team in baseball is essentially doing it right now. Earlier this season, Max Muncy was horrible. His batting average sat at 164 at the All-Star break, and his power had evaporated. He only had 9 homers with a .319 slugging percentage at the same time. If he was almost any other player, there's no way Dave Roberts would send him out there for 238 plate appearances. But Max Muncy isn't any other player. He walked 18.5% of the time during the first half of the season, which means that despite having a batting average well below the Mendoza line, he had a .320 on base percentage, meaning that he actually reached base more than a league average hitter. So despite having the 12th worst batting average in baseball this season at 196, Max Muncy actually finished the season as someone who was 6% better than a league average hitter. This means he was considered a better hitter than Alec Bohm this season, who hit .280. Max Muncy hardly swings in general. He swings nearly 10% less than an average hitter on pitches that are strikes, and 11.5% fewer on pitches that are balls. This helps him turn these into free passes, and what essentially allowed him to keep playing pre-All-Star break even though he could barely hit the ball. Daniel Vogelbach is a guy who does the same thing, and if he wasn't so selective, there's a good chance he wouldn't even be in the big leagues. Cavan Biggio, Jesse Winker, and Aaron Hicks are all powerless guys with low batting average, but they've been able to stay on playoff teams because they don't swing at pitches outside of the zone, letting them walk a lot. And even though some of these players are hated by their fans, others get bought pizza by them. Carlos Santana probably would have been out of baseball years ago because he's slow and can't play defense. He's also only hit over 231 since 2018, but he walks like crazy, and despite barely hitting over 200 this season, he had an above average on base percentage because he walked 14% of the time. I could continue to ramble on about fringe players who don't swing at balls, take walks, and are barely league average, but there's no better example of not swinging and being elite than Juan Soto. Juan Soto has been a mainstay in the major leagues since he was just 19 years old. Some people have said that he is the greatest hitter since Ted Williams, and the thing that Soto does best is to not swing. Since coming into the league as a teenager, Soto has the 6th lowest chase rate in the league. He's also had the 8th lowest swing rate in general during that time frame. Soto isn't a guy who's holding on to his career for dear life either. In fact, he might just be MLB's first $500 million man. MLB front offices love guys with high walk rates because it's one of the hardest skills to train for, and Soto has already had it from a young age. In 2019, Juan Soto's plate discipline took center stage when he started doing the Soto shuffle. He would do this after taking pitches that he thought were good, but not quite good enough to fool him. Some fans loved it and some fans hated it, but the point was made. Juan Soto was better than you. And so when you couple that with his power, you might have the greatest player of all time. He was so good that the Washington Nationals traded him for prospects that were barely younger than him. And even though his first 3 months in San Diego have looked like a disappointment, he was still reaching base nearly 40% of the time. But there's no better example of this approach being used at the team-wide level than this year's Dodgers. The key to winning is not to never swing, it's to hardly swing. Los Angeles won 111 games this season, and they had the lowest chase rate in the league. They had guys like Max Muncy, Freddie Freeman, Tracy Thompson, Austin Barnes, and Gavin Lux all walk more than 10% of the time. And when you combine that with a team that finished 5th in homers, you have a team that outscored their opponents by over 330 runs. Not swinging sounds contradictory to what baseball is, but it might just win you the World Series.